Like, let's get it in gear.
All right, so I would like to call to order. I'm going to call to a meeting the adjourned regular city council meeting for the city of San Clemente. Today's date is July 22nd, 2021.
Did you want to do the pledge?
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem is going to lead us in the Pledge of
Certainly.
Allegiance.
Stand, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Councilmember Duncan,
Here.
Councilmember Noblock,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem James.
Here.
Mayor Ward,
Present.
and Councilmember Ferguson is absent.
Mayor Ward, if I might say a few words as we start the meeting.
Yes, go
All
ahead,
right.
Councilmember Duncan.
Just wanted to note and congratulate our San Clemente residents in the Olympics for surfing, Chloe Andino and Carolyn Marks. Both of them, really dark in this picture. Both of them made the quarterfinals. Chloe didn't get through and Carolyn is surfing right now. So you can tune in on your phones. But yeah, just really, really happy to have San Clemente residents in the first surfing competition in the Olympics. And what better to have 2 out of 4 from San Clemente, the home of USA Surfing, Surftown USA. So just wanted to congratulate them and hopefully we can get them in here at some point in the meeting.
That would be great. So think good thoughts right now for Carolyn. Okay,
First item on the agenda is draft housing element update, and we do have some speaker cards on this item.
all
If you
right.
want those now.
Let's hear from the public. And could you call out a couple names at a time so that that other person knows they're on deck?
Okay. First will be Sandy Exelby, followed by Donna Vidrine, followed by Kathy Esfahani.
Thank you. And Sandy, what city are you from?
San Clemente
Thank you.
since 1975. Good evening, Mayor Ward and council members. Californians will mark the state's largest commitment ever, $4.8 billion in assisting people without adequate and safe housing. Last month, lawmakers agreed to expand the program to convert former hotels into permanent housing with federal coronavirus relief dollars, and to provide an additional $2 billion over 2 years to local governments. These funds are boosted by federal pandemic relief. Beyond helping the homeless, the new state budget includes $10 billion in spending on housing, including $1.75 billion for affordable housing construction and millions in rental assistance, foreclosure prevention, mortgage assistance, and first-time homeowner help. An estimated 160,000 Californians are homeless, growth of over 39% over the last 5 years, not just in urban centers, but also in small and rural communities. $1 billion over the next 12 months and another $1 billion beginning July of the following year can be used for any combination of homeless programs, shelters, rental subsidies, and permanent housing. Counties will get $224 million. Most allocations will be based on the size of community homeless population calculated in 2019. It's hard to believe that at one time, we were very proud of efforts to provide affordable housing. I was serving on the Human Affairs Committee, and agencies came together to address affordable housing under capable city leadership. Now we are behind and pushing against the number of housing units needed when we need to focus on what we can do to house those in need. In the 80s, a retired teacher, Mary Erickson, spoke on housing needs during public comments at many council meetings. She was a kind and very well-informed speaker, passionate about the many people working in our community who could not afford to live here. In 1991, Mary Erickson Community Housing became a 501c3 nonprofit focusing on infill housing opportunities. We had golf tournaments, dinners, and other fundraising activities. In San Clemente alone, Mary Erickson Community Housing acquired and rehabbed 22 units and other units scattered throughout our community. They developed the Monarch Beach Resort Rental Assistance Program for 50 resort employees, including
Can you,
Oh,
yes, you need to wrap it up.
they developed the Monarch Beach Resort Rental Assistance Program for 50 resort employees, including life skills, tenant education, and the Teens Forward programs. The difficult challenge to attract new affordable unit construction is a reality. However, we have at least 4 small motels that might be enlarged or rehabbed with available funding if owners are approached and interested.
Sandy, thank you very much. Yeah, we need to stop. Thank you.
We come together tonight to hear City Council's strategy to provide high-quality, affordable housing for low-income and special need households through inclusionary housing incentives, direct financial assistance, and administrative support. As our elected representatives, it is your legal responsibility to identify land at appropriate densities and appropriate locations to meet San Clemente's housing needs. We know the HCD, California Department of Housing and Community Development, requires San Clemente to plan for housing and complete a project update for 2021 through 2029. Project update is due October 15th, 2021. Please complete this task quickly to avoid penalties, loss of income revenue, and restrictions on permits affecting our businesses and residents. Demonstrate leadership to city staff in meeting this deadline with a strategy and action plan, a plan that meets our city's responsibility to provide adequate planning and resources for San Clemente's housing needs for all income levels, specifically low and very low income levels. Advocate for San Clemente's unhoused. The SP2 zone identified by the city and Rancho San Clemente Business Park is woefully inadequate. The Business Owners Association is hostile to the idea of a shelter. The SB2 zone should be expanded to include the 10 acres of the business park located on Pico, which is owned by the Emergency Shelter Coalition. ESC wants to donate the land for a shelter and affordable housing. Instead of seizure and litigation, allow the ESC to use the land for these purposes. Include the property in the SP2 zone. We tell our children and business employees, get the job done and do it well. It is your work project to complete. That's why you were elected to City Council as our representatives. The state and county have resources to assist San Clemente in accomplishing the city's plan for housing needs. Let's hear your strategy and plan for affordable housing for all San Clemente residents, including working families who have limited incomes for their housing needs. Thank you.
Next is Kathy Esfahani, followed by Bill Krutinger. That's it, followed by Bill Krutinger.
Good evening. I've studied the inventory of vacant and underutilized residential sites that the city has identified in the housing element as having the potential to help us meet our RHNA numbers. I've also studied the inventory of the candidates for rezoning, which are also supposed to help us meet our RHNA numbers. I have to tell you, after studying these things carefully, I come to the conclusion that we do not have adequate sites to meet our requirement of 446 lower income affordable units in the next planning period. But there is a site which could help us completely meet those numbers. And that's the 10-acre emergency shelter site, which Donna Vidrine just mentioned, and which our Affordable Housing Coalition has repeatedly asked the city to include in its inventory. We have repeatedly asked you to look to that site to solve several housing needs. One of them is our need for emergency shelter. The current SB2 zone, as Donna just mentioned, is inadequate because there's almost zero probability that it can actually get built there because of so much hostility on the part of the business owners. And yet you have a landowner, the Emergency Shelter Coalition, which wants to donate the land for an emergency shelter, for affordable housing, for supportive housing, for transitional housing. It's 10 acres. If the city chose to zone it for the Talega specific plan, 40 acres, 40 acres per, I'm sorry, 40 dwelling units per acre, we will easily meet the RHNA numbers for lower income. And we can also have a successful shelter. We have a crisis, of course, that's happening right now off our freeway, where Caltrans is going to evict 24 people who've been camping there for a year because there's no shelter in San Clemente and no affordable housing that's available. These people need a place to go, and the city should do its part to make land available. That site is something that should be in the housing element. I have very little time left, but in terms of why the sites that have been identified will not meet the RHNA numbers, the inventory of residential sites relies very heavily on 2 recycled sites, the Los Molinos area, which is multiple sites owned by multiple people. It would be great if they could be consolidated, but it hasn't happened in the last 2 housing cycles. Do you mind if I take a minute to
No,
wrap up?
No, I need you to wrap up, but can you tell me your residence?
Yes, San Clemente. I live in
San
North Beach.
Thank you very much.
Sure. So Los Molinos and Calle Lago are both recycled sites. Hasn't happened in the last 2 cycles. I don't think it would happen now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Bill Krutinger.
Good evening, Mayor Ward, City Council staff. If you'll look at table 2-37 on your draft housing element, you can see that over the last 20 years, only 508 affordable units have been built. The city's 2013 to 21 housing element shows that the 5th cycle RHNA numbers at that time were 581 total, with 229 of them being for low-income units. And that's an 8-year cycle relative to the previous 20 years. So we're not on pace, and we haven't been on pace to meet these needs for decades. The numbers that we're looking at today are 982 total, with 446 needed for the different levels of low-income housing units. The city's falling behind, and prior council decisions to adopt first an inclusionary housing policy and then to establish an in lieu fee put the duty of updating those policies on current and future councils. I ask that you don't continue to kick this can down the road. The current policies are simply inadequate. The consultant hired by the city proved that the inclusive housing policies that some people have suggested for 15% affordable, that those policies are sustainable. And the in lieu fee must be commensurate with whatever that in lieu, or I'm sorry, that affordable housing policy is. Right now, with the in lieu fee being 1% and the affordable requirement 4%, we're basically subsidizing development at the cost of low-income families in our city whenever that in lieu fee is paid. And that's just an untenable situation. I don't know exactly what that in lieu fee should be, but people have mentioned numbers between 10 and 15,000, and if that's commensurate, then great. One other thing, page D4, which is down at near the end of your packet, says that the council determined the fee formula for the in lieu fee to be appropriate. And I don't believe that's really how it happened. I know the two members here today voted to cut that fee quite substantially. And then it was abandoned prior to its second reading and did not become law. That's not a great way to make city policy, I think. And I hope that you'll take the opportunity to change that formula. The impetus to do so, it still exists. I know city staff wanted that formula changed, and that you'll make it something that is hopefully effective. Thank you.
That was the last speaker.
Okay, thank you very much. Go ahead and let staff take this over.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. This evening, we wanted to talk about the draft housing element update and some milestones. I'll just ask if IT can help display the PowerPoint. Thank you. So this evening, we want to talk about the project timeline, draft documents, some upcoming milestones, and then also what we're asking to obtain feedback on tonight, specifically the Housing Action Plan.
Would the audience appreciate if she spoke more into the mic? Is that okay?
Thank you. And so just to reiterate, this evening, we would like some feedback from the City Council, specifically on the Housing Action Plan. So where have we been? So far, we've conducted 3 community workshops, 2 virtual, 1 in person. We've also conducted 3 surveys. In addition to the workshops and surveys, we've held a special presentation, an EIR scoping meeting, and as well as some study sessions and public hearings with the Planning Commission and the City Council. Next up, we're holding this evening study session. There is a public comment period for our program EIR or PEIR. We'll work on revising the housing element. We'll hold a public hearing with the Planning Commission in August, as well as September. And we will also look at holding a public hearing with the City Council in September and/or October. We're required to submit our housing element by October 15th of this year. After that, we would work on implementation starting next year and going through 2029. Draft documents. We have our housing element that we're looking at this evening, which is included in your packet. We're also updating our safety element, and that update is required in conjunction with our housing element updates. It is available on our website, and it's currently being reviewed by our state geological department. It has been reviewed and approved by CAL FIRE. And the last draft document is our Program Environmental Impact Report, or PEIR. That's currently out for public review, and the public comment period ends on Tuesday, September 7th. Upcoming milestones. We are going to receive a letter from HCD, or the Housing and Community Development Department. And based on that letter, we will revise the draft housing element. A revision will also include some comments from City Council, Planning Commission, and the public. We will also, after closing the public comment for the PEIR, we will also produce a final EIR for the housing element and safety element updates. We were able to talk with HCD to get some high-level comments that we would expect in their formal letter. And those high-level comments include looking at data sources to track what the housing conditions are in the city of San Clemente, making sure that we're verifying affordable units and when they expire or that affordability expires, making sure that our ADU ordinance matches those requirements of state law, clarifying and confirming what uses, specifically residential uses, we allow by right. And then also considering elimination of our conditional use permit requirement for residential projects of 5 or more units. And we'll talk about that more in just a little bit. Big picture, big takeaway was that overall our housing element is on track. So that's great news. What we would like from you this evening is feedback on 3 parts of our plan. In your housing element draft, you have a chapter 5, which is your housing action plan, and there's 17 programs, and it covers the period of 2021 through 2029. Those programs, while several of them are ongoing, some of them require action from the city through the next 8 years. So we'll talk about those actions that are required next year and ask a specific question for feedback from council. We'll talk about those actions that are required by 2024, 2025, and then also the actions that are required by 2029. So first, those programs that are required by the end of 2022 are zoning amendments, and those zoning amendments are included in programs 2, 4, and 14. Program 2 is rezoning the existing sites. So those are your sites that are included in the 4th and the 5th cycle housing element. There is a map that we have available, and I'll just flip through that slide real quick. This is an example of those sites. Those sites that are identified by number and highlighted in orange, those are some of our existing sites that are in the 5th cycle housing element. In order to keep those as counting towards our RHNA number on this cycle, we do have to make sure that any development that comes into the city that provides at least 20% affordable units within their development is allowed by right. We'll also take a look at our density bonus ordinance and update it per state law changes. We'll include a low barrier navigation center zoning amendment, an emergency and transitional housing amendment, and that's just to update our code in regards to parking and to bring that up to state law, and then also state law requirements for supportive housing. We'll ask council if it's okay to include in program 14 a zoning amendment to eliminate the CUP or conditional use permit requirement for residential projects of 5 or more units. Then in 2024 and 2025, we'd be looking at one of our biggest programs, and that's rezoning existing sites to accommodate additional RHNA housing units. We'll also evaluate our accessory dwelling unit program and make sure that it's actually encouraging the construction of ADUs to count towards our RHNA numbers in the intensity that we would like to see or more. If we need to revisit that program and make some changes to encourage ADUs even more, we can do that at that time. This shows where we would, the sites that we're currently looking at as potential rezone sites. And then finally, for the end of our housing planning period, we would be looking at and considering evaluations or amendments to our lot consolidation ordinance, our affordable housing overlay, and our inclusionary housing program. And that's to evaluate and then consider changing those. This evening, we'd like some feedback to make sure that the city council is okay for us to include a program or a component of the program to amend the zoning ordinance, sorry about that typo, so that our percentage of units for each development that must be affordable in the code is not 15, but it's changed to 4%, which matches our program in the housing element document you have this evening. That ends staff's presentation, and we are available for any questions. I'm looking forward to your feedback this evening.
Okay, I just have a quick question. You talked about programs 2, 4, and 14. I didn't catch what 4 was. I'm sure you talked about it, but I didn't mark it down.
I apologize about that. That's the density bonus ordinance. There were some changes the past year or so to the density bonus state law. And so we would update ours to make sure it's in compliance with that.
Right. And did the council, we already did vote on it the one time and directed you to make that match. Is that correct?
Correct. It has recently been updated. The state has made some additional changes, so we do have to update it again.
Okay. Can you tell us what, just really quickly, what those changes are in the state law?
The biggest piece is increasing the bonus itself. Where before you might have a 35% density bonus, now you have 50%. So it's just increasing those incentives.
You have a look
Well,
on your face.
yeah,
Did
just
that
can
not
you-
make sense?
Can you go over what a density bonus is? Because I think that might help put it in context.
Absolutely, thank you. So when a proposal comes in for a residential development or even a mixed use development with residential as part of it, a developer might propose a certain number of units, say 10. And if the developer was to propose some of those units to be affordable, which there's multiple levels, there's very low, low, and moderate. Depending on the number of units that they propose for affordable units, they'll get what's called a density bonus, or they'll qualify for a density bonus. There's two pieces to that. One is that they could obtain permission to do additional units. So maybe if the project only allows 10 units, they might receive, in this case, 5 more units if they qualified for that 50% bonus. So instead of 10 units, you'd have 15. The second component is what you call incentives or concessions. So in order to build those 10 to 15 units, they might ask for an increase in height, a reduction in setbacks, an increase in lot coverage, et cetera.
Okay.
So I have just a couple things. I'll go ahead and start it off. I heard from the public that what we've already designated for SB2 zone is inadequate because the owners have they have discretion. The owners are going to have discretion over that, but it's a large area, and it was certified by the state of California that it did meet the requirements for our housing element. Our housing element was certified for that. My concern, and I think the city would have a concern on adding those 10 acres because they are an open space. They are not zoned for residential. They are open space designation. So I personally wouldn't be considering that to add. I also heard a lot about the motels. They could just be converted. And certainly that is something that the state has been looking at. But we are in a coastal zone. And I'm not sure, I believe some of those motels on El Camino Real are considered as affordable lodging and how we meet our coastal element. So I am concerned about all of this that the state's trying to do. We're getting squeezed between the Coastal Commission and our requirements there and the requirements of the arena numbers. And I'm not sure that they ever considered there is another state agency that has requirements or makes us have certain quotas for our coastal elements. We have to meet that too. So there was a comment that I made at the last one that I wanted to make sure that anytime someone came in and wanted to look at it, one of our hotels or motels, that we get actual permission from the Coastal Commission. Because I don't want to do that and then, we get kicked by the Coastal Commission that we have done something wrong. We've taken something out of our inventory on affordable lodging, and now we no longer meet that element. So I'm concerned about that, and I think it's going to come to a head on its own. But I just want to remind staff that I did ask for that question to be answered, and no motel or hotel should ever be taken out of the inventory without that permission or consideration, because I think we've counted those, I believe. The other part, I definitely think that since our zoning ordinance does not match the percentage that we have put it in the for our housing element, we needed to match up 4%. So I mean that's kind of a given. We need to make sure that matches. Other than what you've done, I appreciate everything that you've looked at and being able to count things that we have done before. And I think the reason we're able to do that is because we're giving greater density now. And if we do that, we're able to count the other zoning that the overlays that we've had to bring them forward. Is that true? Didn't we have to make some concessions in density?
The
do that?
density doesn't change, but there's a by right approval if they have 20% affordable units.
20%. So that's what it was. So if we conceded and agreed to that, we were able to consider our past zoning overlays that we have done. So I don't necessarily have anything more to add. It's kind of at council's pleasure what we do on this. My concern was the milestones, and I think you answered that because it was mentioned tonight. You better do this by October 15th. I don't think the city has any indication that we will not submit our housing element on time. So I would ask that if we're ready to go, we actually get that in as early as possible. I can't see, is there any reason why we would not want to submit that early? Unless if we have all our I's dotted and T's crossed, why not submit it?
Yeah, we do run up in this cycle, we run up to an issue in regards to the environmental review. So we won't be able to submit the housing element early per se, but we definitely will make our deadline of October 15th. Our environmental review document public comment period ends the beginning of September. Our consultant needs some time to respond to comments. Depending on the scope of the comments, the longer it takes to respond to those to create the final EIR. And it's with the final EIR that we need for the council to actually be able to adopt the housing element and be consistent with CEQA. So there is a timing issue there. Without that, we could certainly submit it early, but we do want to be consistent with CEQA.
Okay, no, I understand that. And it's very important, where we put housing, it's important that it's not dangerous in any way to those people as much as we can. I believe everything in California is in an earthquake zone. Maybe there's some more difficulties in some areas than others, but it's all that. My concern too is a lot of, it's fire hazard zone, and certainly with that open space lot, it would be an issue, several safety factors there. And I think that was considered prior when the planning commission looked at that lot. But the EIR is important. I wasn't thinking about the timing. So I appreciate that. But just the mention that, we better do it on time. I don't think we have any, there's no reason why the city would not want to put that in on time.
Yes, you're absolutely correct. And the great news is that HCD really does see our housing element in its draft form as on track. There's no gaping holes that they've identified thus far. So it's great news for the city to make those revisions and really refine it for submittal and approval.
Great. Okay, so that's all my comment. Go ahead.
I
Councilmember
have
Noble.
a couple of comments. You're looking for council feedback. When I look at the draft assessment and the work that's been done on it, a lot of work has been done. I appreciate that. One concern that I have is in the appendix where it talks about the stakeholders that were notified. I didn't see a number of groups that I would expect to see on there as stakeholders. Specifically, I didn't see the BIA, which a major part of this analysis deals with the cost of construction. I didn't see the BIA on there. I didn't see the Orange County Apartment Owners Association, the Orange County Realtors Association, the Association of Builders and Contractors of Southern California. And I would expect that they would could be able to provide some significant impact. I didn't see them. That concerned me a little bit. In addition, I'll just go through this real quick if I could. The comment on the homeless persons on page HE 29. And this is a draft element. So this is going to be the official policy of the city. on page HE 29, there's a discussion of the homeless people, and it describes HUD's 4 categories, and that's all it states for homeless. I think that should be expanded to recognize additional categories of homeless people. And that is homeless people that are homeless by choice, those that are significantly impacted by drugs, and those that are significantly impacted by mental conditions. That criteria, those categories weren't included at all. Going through this, also in terms of housing constraints on HE 39, under housing constraints, our statement says that there's a governmental factors that most directly influence these market conditions is, and it lists a number of conditions. I'd like to see that amended so there's not the governmental factors that most impact, but governmental factors that significantly impact, and that would be expanded to include factors concerning the cost of housing based on our regulations, including the time frame expansions that are created by the review of the design review subcommittee, the environmental review, the carrying costs for projects that impact the cost of housing, and other regulatory factors. Those were not included. I think they should be included.
Steve, do you have a
Rick,
page for
a
that?
question, a generic question regarding well, actually, before I get to that, just another comment on HE 54, where table 3-6, where it talks about planning and building fees. I didn't see included in that the cultural heritage permit fee that can increase the building fees. It's referenced in another part of the plan, but it probably should be included on table 3-6 as a potentially significant impact on building fees. And then I had a general question on table 3-7, and that is the TCA fees for both the Foothill East and the San Joaquin corridor. Those fees were impacted, but Madam Mayor, we've withdrawn from the TCA. Both, I think our action was for both associations. And should these fees even be listed now if they're not going to be a future impact? That was a question I had of staff, maybe.
So I think that maybe our city attorney should opine on that, the possibility of that not being listed here at this time.
I'm just wondering if it should be removed from that table.
Yeah, on that front, TCAs have taken the position that because they, while we were members, pledged this revenue stream to bondholders, that we have to keep collecting it. So we'd have to litigate that issue and prevail in it. Otherwise, they're going to assert that. It's
So we have to keep that fee. We have to collect that fee from home builders until litigation is resolved.
Well, no, till their debt's retired. That's the agency's position.
Or
Yep.
until we prevail. in
Or
litigation.
until we prevail in litigation.
Okay, thank you.
That would be a reason why we would like other cities to try to get this debt paid off.
Yeah. An additional comment I have regarding the city's, our efforts to not unduly constrain housing. I kind of am troubled by a couple of sentences on HE 56, where it says the city's approval process is designed to accommodate rather than hinder development and does not unduly constrain housing. I would simply disagree with that. I think the city's process and the governmental process generally significantly hinders the constraint on housing. So it's sort of a self-serving statement that says government's really not the problem. In my opinion, government's a significant part of the problem. So that first sentence, I would recommend that be eliminated, the entire sentence after table 3.8. I think it's a self-serving statement, adds nothing to the housing plan. And I would also ask the additional sentence, which is equally troubling on page HE 57, on the third paragraph from the bottom, the last sentence that says the city's processing and permit procedures are consistent with the state planning and zoning laws, and they are not considered to be unreasonable constraint. not considered by whom. I think, again, that's a self-serving statement. I don't think that statement adds anything other than to say to the community at large, government's not the problem and our process is not the problem. I couldn't disagree more. So my recommendation would be for that sentence to be eliminated. And as we go forward, I don't know if you're looking for council input. I don't know if any of our comments need to be voted on, or if they just take them and decide to do with them what staff will. I'm not sure how we quite move forward with
Yeah.
any recommended changes.
Thank you very much for all of your comments. We
I'm
really
not done
appreciate
yet,
it.
but go ahead and answer that.
Yeah. So depending on the comment, oftentimes we'll add some additional justification or make some modifications, such as the modifications that you're asking for here. We would take those comments and make a determination whether we should modify that language, delete it, and or provide additional explanation.
Okay, thank you. And again, this is just for feedback, so I'm just providing my feedback. On page HE 59 at the very top, there's a discussion about our local coastal plan and the cost of the coastal commission in processing developments. I think my recommendation is that we move forward on it. And I know we don't have a certified implementation plan, but if we did, I think people that try to build homes in our city could be spared anywhere from 1 to 3 years of coastal commission review. So I would, just in terms of feedback, I would encourage my colleagues on the council to consider moving forward aggressively with a certified coastal implementation plan.
Where do we stand on that?
Cecilia, you want to give an update on that really quick, please?
I've actually, based on some input from the city council on where you want to go with our local coastal program, have been making attempts to meet with the coastal commission staff, their executive director, Jack Ainsworth, and their deputy director, Carl Schwing, to see if we can work out some kind of path forward. There are some significant sticking points in terms of the coastal plan. I have not been successful in getting an appointment with them to talk about moving our local coastal program forward.
So do you think maybe COVID at the time is preventing that? Because I remember Mr. Ainsworth was at the time when we chose not to go forward because of those significant impacts to our residents. He said that he would do everything to try to work that out with us. But you know, we're in COVID and I don't know what's going on with coastal, what their workload is. Maybe it's really high right now and this is the least of what they, want to deal with. I don't know. Do you think that has anything to do with it, their workload or COVID or?
I think COVID has delayed somewhat our ability to meet and collaborate. I also think that internally, the Coastal Commission is still struggling with some of the main sticking points that are the focus of our local coastal program, because they're trying to address that with jurisdictions up and down the state.
Right, it's the same issue.
It is. the same
So
issue.
they might be waiting to see what happens with all the other
Yeah.
jurisdictions before they want to come back to us.
But we'll keep pushing ahead.
My thinking on that is simply the squeaky wheel gets the oil, and if they're not responsive, it's because we haven't pushed hard enough. So I don't know that our assembly member, our senator has pushed on it, or our congressman, but I think we could exercise some political leverage and knock on the door maybe a little louder.
Okay,
I'll
I'll think about that.
just a thought.
Our assembly member is asking next week for a meeting, whether there's anything that our city's concerned about. So think about bringing, whether I should bring that up.
That's a great idea.
Okay, so please think about that and help me with some points on that
I will.
and what our issue is.
Yeah, to continue on with my comments, Madam Mayor, if I could.
Yes.
On the program, the action programs, number one, I had a question on, actually, it wasn't on number one, it was on number two. Well, actually, I do have a question on number one. The rezoning of the properties, just a quick question. Could when we rezone, can we have multiple zoning? Can we have high residential as well as commercial? Can you do multiple zoning is not a problem, correct?
On one parcel?
on one parcel, right?
Yeah, and our vision for this rezoning program would be the existing zoning or base zoning would remain, and we would just do an overlay to allow housing.
Great, great, thank you. Comment on program number 2. I had a question under the objectives. It says that it's recommended that we amend the zoning ordinance by 2022 to establish a by right approval process required by state law, which allows the city to require the architectural and detailed design of all projects to meet architectural design guidelines. I'm confused on that statement. Does that mean that by right, there's no design review subcommittee analysis? Or are we just making sure that the architectural designs are consistent with our generic design plans that are stated on our ordinance?
We would be able to talk through when we came through with that program about exactly what that would look like. The primary change would be that our architectural guidelines would be codified in the code so that someone would come in and not have to go through a discretionary
I
process.
thought that's what it meant. I just wanted to make sure. So that's
Thank you.
helpful. Thank you.
Steve, could you please give page numbers? I happen to
Sure.
find that right as you did it. I did
That
find
was
program 2.
HE 93.
I got that, but
No.
as you go forward, can you give page numbers? when you
Sure.
talk?
Sure. I had a question on HE 97 where it talks about at program 9, the pursue funding sources for the programs. I guess my question had to do with consultants. Does the planning department plan on using consultants to pursue the additional grant funds and so forth to fund these programs, or is existing staff capable of making these requests?
We currently use a combination of existing staff and consultants. And Cecilia, correct me if I'm wrong, but we would continue to use both staff and the
So on
consultants.
program 9, you'd envision using consultants, outside consultants, as opposed to in-house staff?
Yes, there is a large component of outside consultants.
Okay. Again, on this one, in terms of a recommendation, I would recommend that we use in-house staff. And part of the reason for that, my colleagues, why I mentioned that is this whole program is designed, our charge is to provide zoning, not to actually accomplish the task and become the muscle man, if you will, to make sure these things occur, provide the staffing, the resources to make sure they occur. So as we go forward, I'm looking for more of a governmental accommodation in terms of the zoning to allow the marketplace to provide these services, as opposed to we step in, we provide the location, the consultants, the funds, and sort of do the heavy lifting, if you will, of the development project. We're not in the development business. So I'd like to see, again, the focus as we move forward be on our legal requirement, which is to provide sufficient zoning, but we're not responsible if it doesn't happen. I know there's potential assessments in the future if it never happens, but again, I think a lot of what I'm reading goes beyond the charge, and that's why I make a number of these comments.
So you do realize that what you're talking about on program 9 is CDBG funds?
I understand.
Okay.
Another concern I had is goal 5.3 on page HE 98. And I guess what concerns me here is the sort of the language and the concept generally. This is a equal housing opportunity. The third bullet point says review and implement cities' policies through a lens of equality. I don't know what that means. Does that mean we're doing this on a lens of inequality and we're being unfair and improper in our conduct? I think that's the language, in my opinion, it's the language of the left. And programs 5.3.2, where it talks about discrimination. Not only did I disagree, I'm personally offended that our housing element says we need an element that talks about racial segregation and lending discrimination and lack of specific investments. I'm just offended by chart table 5.2, where it says racial segregation. I would like to see the reference to the lens of equality and the racial segregation completely stricken from this plan. In addition, the second section down where it says housing, mobility, and protection against displacement has a number of items that, in my opinion, interfere with the free marketplace. That is acquiring a covert market rate housing affordability program 10, working to preserve the city's affordable inventory 17. The property owners are really responsible for this. The market will get there. I just think this is interference with the marketplace. On the third box down labeled disproportionate housing needs, again, I'm offended at the concept of discriminatory lending practices. My God, we're not the federal government. We're a local city allowing free enterprise to reign and for the housing needs to be met by the free enterprise system, by the free marketplace. So I'm just, again, I can see how this language gets in there. It's a lot of plans all over the state and a number of cities around the country. And it's easy to parrot the language of other jurisdictions, but I don't think we need it in our plan. The next page.
Can I just make a quick comment to that?
Sure.
Steve? And this goes to your, by the way, it's not equality, it's equity. I think quite different term, but as far as having consultants versus staff, I mean, I think we need to understand what we're doing here, right? We're trying to put forward a plan that is going to show a good faith effort to meet the state requirements so that the HCD will approve our housing element. We're not trying to have the perfect housing element or what we would ever wish we could have. We're trying to meet a certain state standard. We can't change those standards. We might wish they were different. In fact, I think we probably all do, but we're sort of stuck with those standards. So to my mind, we need the consultants because they understand what HCD wants to see. And there's no way our staff could get to that level. These are professionals who do nothing but this. So we do need those folks. And these type of tables, as distasteful as it might be, I think it's language that they want to see, that state wants to see in the plan. I don't think it does any damage. I think it just recognizes that there are inherent inequities in the housing system. We want to show cognizance to that. Whether we have particular issues in our city, I think is a different issue. So I think that's where I'm coming from on this. Is we're trying to put forward a plan that shows that San Clemente is trying to accomplish all of these state mandated housing needs. We have consultants that help us get there. That's what this is. It's not, we're not sort of doing every single little tiny detail that's in the plan. So just to counter that.
I appreciate your comments, Chris, and my thoughts on that and response is if the state wants to do it, they can pass a law to compel us to do it. But this is our housing element, and to try to meet, to satisfy.
But they approve our housing element.
That's right. But we'll let them disapprove it if they don't like it. But this is our product, not theirs.
Okay.
This would be my response to your comment. Moving on the paragraph page HE 100. On the bottom block, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bullet points. The first 2 bullet points are highlighted in dark bullet points. The others are light colored points. I think, again, all this activity is, again, sort of a laboring war for the development process. I think all this can be accomplished through simply having on our city website the legal requirements that the developers are obligated to meet, rather than provide education, do this sort of outreach, do this additional stuff. I just think that a notification on our city website would suffice. My next comment is on HE 101 regarding, again, homeless. There's a reference there to 2,000 homeless persons or persons with special needs. I don't know where that number comes from. Last week, when the last council meeting, when we had a homeless update, we had about 140 or so contacts, and 47 or 48, maybe 49, I'm not sure, 47, 48 of those contacts were the same individuals over and over again. So I'm not sure that we have 2,000 homeless persons. So I don't know that our plan should be referencing a number where I don't have any idea where that comes from. I think it's grossly exaggerated. I could be wrong, but that's my impression.
Just to note, it says and persons with special needs as like a separate category. So homeless and separately persons with special needs, which would be seniors, disabled residents.
So it isn't stating 2,000 homeless.
Well, special needs could add up. That's true, but in the homeless, it's a very, very small number. Another question I had of staff is on page HE 103. There's, one of the objectives is to provide 20 loans through the home rehabilitation program. Again, the source of those loans was the in-lieu fee. Is that the source? What's the source of the loans, and where do you anticipate those loans going?
The source is the CDBG funds, CDBG funds. And those are typically provided to certain lower income residents that need some assistance in rehabilitating their house.
Okay.
It's an existing program.
This is a housing rehabilitation program. Does this include alternative dwelling units or no?
No, this
This
is
would-
for property owners or homeowners who need financial assistance to make health and safety repairs to their properties. The individuals that typically qualify tend to be senior citizens.
Okay, and how large roughly is that block grant source of funds right now in the magnitude of scale? We're talking 1 million, 2 million?
That particular source of
Roughly, right.
funding that we allocate to the housing rehab program, it's generally about $80,000 per fiscal year.
Oh, just 80 for the year? Okay.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I had a number of comments on the appendix, but if anyone else has a comment, I can organize those so I don't waste anyone's time while I'm going through them. And I did have one specific request. Let me bring that up now if I could, and that is on the very last page, HED 4, where there's a description of the housing, the cost of housing in lieu fee. I understand at a meeting, I believe back in April, we had cut that number in half from 4% to 2%. Then it came, I missed a meeting, I was out of the country, and I understand that item came back for a vote and failed 2-2.
It was the second reading of that resolution. It did not pass the second reading.
Yeah, I'd like to ask if I could that be re-agendized so that we have a full council. I didn't realize it didn't pass because of my absence.
Well, I think,
So
you
I know
know,
when
we
the
can
appropriate
give
timing on that
direction
would be,
tonight
but,
of, you know, what we would like to see. Because this is coming back to us. Jennifer, when is this coming back to us again? If we did that, that would have to come back to us before it goes back to the planning commission, would it not?
Oh, the inclusionary housing program. It could be re-agendized to the city council agenda without going back to the planning commission, I believe.
Without, but it should be as soon as possible because as we go through the process.
It does not have to happen before the housing elements, if that's what
Thank
you're
you.
asking.
Thank you.
I have a question on that.
Yes. Can you talk into the mic?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's
So I have a question on that, city attorney. Can that be a motion from Councilmember Noblock? He wasn't here, or would that require a motion from someone that was here to, is this a motion to reconsider?
Well, it could be, bringing back the second reading would be a motion to reconsider, and that would have to be made by somebody who voted in support of the prevailing motion. So no, it couldn't be brought back as a motion to reconsider, but you could ask it to be brought back as a new enactment to be considered with the package that you have here.
You would be the only person here for the second reading that voted.
Unless it was
in
brought
favor.
back as a new enactment. then
That's
it
right,
wouldn't require
yeah.
the same-
You could reinitiate it, but not bring back second
Do we
reading.
do that this evening, or would that require a motion at a regular council meeting?
You can do it this evening with regard to a future agenda, yes.
I think that would be good to do with what we're doing tonight
Right.
because it kind of follows, you know, what we're doing. You know, if we're going to consider that all again.
So I'll make a motion to bring that back.
I'll second that.
Any direction on just bring
Back what we voted on last time. I don't think it requires any staff work whatsoever.
We have the existing report was part of the agenda.
Not the second reading, but an amendment to the code to change the affordable housing contribution.
And if you would agree to a friendly amendment on that, that when we do bring that back, that the initial, what staff's recommendation was, that come back because that was the staff report,
I'm
so
good.
that we can
That's-
see that.
Thank you, Mayor. That's exactly what you do is start from the first step of that.
So then they would require us, if that motion were to pass, it would then require a second reading at a
Yes.
future council. meeting.
Yes.
Thank you.
So I'll second that motion, and let's go ahead and take a vote on that part.
Councilmember Duncan,
No.
Councilmember Noblock,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem James.
Aye.
Mayor Ward,
Aye.
and Councilmember Ferguson is absent, so that carries 3-1.
Madam Mayor, my last comment on this, if I could, is just on page EC8. It's the, again, it's the racially and ethnically concentrated areas of poverty review. I would recommend that we eliminate C.2.3 completely. It deals with ethnicity and race. It's quoting a HUD report saying whites are most radically segregated and there's distinct advantages associated with residents of white communities. I think this is racial nonsense. It's the white privilege nonsense, and to ascribe that to our town, I find offensive. So I would, and I know the state may like to hear it, but I don't think I like to hear it. So I'd recommend that section be stricken in its entirety. And that concludes my comments, Madam Mayor.
Can I just ask some clarifying questions? All of these things that Councilmember Noblock would like stricken, are these things that have been in our housing element in the past and are just a continuation of, this is an update to our housing element?
That's a good question. And the answer is no. Appendix C especially, it talks about affirmatively furthering fair housing. You'll hear this term, it's abbreviated AFFH. It's relatively new. It is a requirement from the state. We do run the risk of non-approval from HCD, depending on how much we do strike from Appendix C and other portions of the draft housing element. However, with the feedback from council, we would certainly talk with our consultant and see what could be stricken without running that risk from HCD. But I do just want to set the tone, the expectation that that appendix is a very important part of the housing element with the new state housing requirements.
Okay, so from what I heard, obviously if you have a council member that's concerned about it, look at that, but talking to the council, what we've had to do to get our housing elements certified in the past, we had to do several years at work on it at one time, and we're trying to get through this one. This is like the last one. It's the culmination of all the work we've done in the past years so that we can not have to do one until after 2029. I mean, it's super important that we get there, and I don't think this is the time to tell the state we don't like
Well,
this
who
and we're not
draft,
going
did
to
the
do
state
it.
draft this or did we draft it?
This is the requirement of what the state wants to see, and it will be looked at, and we will be, the reason we have consultants on this and we've asked them to help us and they helped us greatly is get through the housing elements so that we could get to this point. And I understand what you're saying, but we can't tell the state, you know what, a state requirement, we aren't going to meet it. If it's a state requirement, we have to meet it in our housing element in order to get our housing element certified. And that was the point that I believe Councilmember Duncan made.
Is the
So
ratio- the-
I would caution you.
I have a question of staff or maybe of council. Is this having this kind of racial comments in our housing element a state requirement?
Yes, our understanding is that it is.
What, could you cite any code or law on that? As I understand it, our housing element is very generic. We're required to provide housing for a mechanism to provide for low-cost housing. I don't remember reading or seeing anything that referenced racial comments about racial segregation and distinct advantages of white communities. I think this is socialist dribble. And I can't believe for a moment that this is required by the state. And if it is, I'd like to see a specific regulation or statute that provides that.
And we can provide that.
Please.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem.
I feel inadequate after what Councilmember Noblock just went through. I had 3 or 4 points I wanted to raise. He raised each one of them, but I am going to attach myself completely with his remarks. What's in here is the religion of race baiting and victimization. And it's sad that we're going to do this. This is not who we are. This is not what we should publish, and I can't vote for it. I do need all this racial nonsense to be taken out. This is not the Jim Crow South. You know, we're not Bull Connor Democrats here. You know, this is San Clemente, and I do not think this needs to be in this. If you show us that we have to have it, that we have to declare ourselves bigots, racist, whatever, well, so we might have to vote for that. But I am extremely troubled by the language in here, and I'm not trying to be provocative. It's just, if I'm going to put my name to this, I need to be comfortable with the wording.
So to be clear, I hate when I hear the words racial. I don't think of it as that. This is an index of the makeup of our city. And we know we do have a concentrated part of our city where there are minorities. And you'll see that on page C3, HEC3, the 42107, there's 49.7% people there on that for our minority concentration. And that, I believe, is part of, we have to look at that and document it. That's part of our housing element. But I don't look at that as being racial.
But right here, it talks about levels of segregation.
Oh, please tell me what page, because I can't follow. I see what you.
HEC 26. And in that, it talks about lending discrimination. Well, we have nothing to do with that. It talks about private discrimination. I'm just uncomfortable with putting these blurbs in there.
And I understand that wording, I do. So I would ask staff to please look at that and see if there's things that we can adjust. Because I don't believe our residents feel that way.
It's classic white privilege when it references on page HEC 9 that fair housing assessment uses percentage of non-Hispanic white population, medium household income as proxies to identify potential areas of influence. Potential areas of white influence. That's race baiting. That's classic socialist language for race baiting. White
Affluent
privilege,
white.
white privilege is being taught to our kids. It's ridiculous. And I simply, I'm troubled by it.
No, I see. So this language, Jennifer, it comes from the state, does it not? So we've kind of incorporated it here, or is this actually in the language for the state requirements?
The context of this appendix is certainly a state requirement, and we will find the statute for that, but we will clarify the exact terminology that does or doesn't need to be in there.
Right. So I think the council would like to see what does have to be in there, and then we'll know what we're seeing has to be in there. So I appreciate the comment. So I do see where it says advantages associated with resident and affluent white communities. Yeah, I see. All right. So if we're going to look at that and have something be brought back, or you're going to come back to us and say, this is exactly what has to be in there. If you tell us that that's what has to be in there, I'm wondering if it has to come back to the council at all. Would you like to see it as part of like a future council meeting? It's one of the items where they bring that back to us?
I wouldn't object to that, Madam Mayor. I guess my thought is, and I'm trying not to be argumentative. These documents are created by consultants in Los Angeles, San Francisco, Oakland, and a lot of this language in some communities may make sense. I don't think it makes sense here. And when our consultants, consultants don't govern the city, we do. And when our consultant says, this is, it's worked in other cities, throw it in there, they won't object to that. That's no reason to keep it in there. So I guess what I'm saying is, if you can find a statute that says this language is critical, we'll deal with the state position of their power over this council. Otherwise, I just think we can strike it as a matter of due course, exercising reasonable discretion without any negative repercussions whatsoever, in my opinion, from the state or anyone else.
So if you do bring that back and it is part of just an item on a council meeting, hopefully on a night where it's a light agenda, if that's
lot of
even
those nights.
possible, if that's even possible, redline the areas that, or the areas where you're adding so that we can, different language so that we can see that easily.
Mayor Ward, can I just point out too, I mean,
Yes.
I completely appreciate the comments from my colleagues there, but I think we're somewhat looking at this maybe the wrong way. This is aspirational language. This is not an indictment on the city or criticizing the city and saying we're doing everything wrong. It's aspirational language based on noticeable inequities and that everybody should be trying to work on. This isn't trying to fundamentally change how San Clemente is operating. It's trying to take account of the disparate effects different policies have had, and to try to avoid doing those kind of things in the future. So anyway, I get your points, but I just look at it totally differently. I look at it as let's aspire to be more equitable in the future. Let's do what we can as a city, knowing that we can't control all these things, and that's all it is. It's not trying to say we're terrible and we need to correct everything we've done. So just to make that point.
So I would like to talk about quickly about the BIA, the Building Industry Association, and all the others. They weighed in with SCAG at that time on the RENA numbers. I just recently read their letter again. They gave their opinion at that point in the process. And a lot of what they said was not considered by SCAG when they dispersed the RENA numbers. I wish some of it had been, but it wasn't. And then,
again, the housing element isn't just RENA. RENA is a small component of the housing element. And providing proper housing in a free market situation really is a building proposition. And the Contractors Association, BIAs and others, that's their business, it's their livelihood, including, thank you, including the
apartment
apartments
association.
and Okra. So that's, but I appreciate your comment on SCAG. But SCAG
Yeah.
is doing their own thing, and we need to
Right,
object
but
to that for sure.
they did weigh in, and I just reread it in preparation for this meeting, and they gave like 3 or 4 pages of recommendation at that point to weigh in
But
on
they
the
were not
housing.
a stakeholder for our, and I'm just suggesting they probably should have been.
I understand that, but your other comment about adding that our design review and different things like that, that our building department, we're inhibiting housing. I don't agree with adding that.
Contribute, I didn't say it contributes to the overall cost and time.
That's just general, but
Well,
what we're
it was a
trying to
general
do
comment,
in
yeah.
this, and what we're ultimately trying to do is do some things by right or less. If someone has 20%, they get some incentives
I
for.
think the point of that language was our processes are in compliance with state and county mandates. So whether you think they're a burden or not, I mean, it's nothing can be done. So it's not like some extra contributory factor that we could take away. It's part of the process.
It just seems not what we want to do when we're going to the state for our housing element.
Well, when
To
you say it's
that
not,
we're contributing, because I don't believe.
when you say it's not what we want to do, this council is made up of 5 people.
I
My
know.
comment,
And
my
you
comment.
gave
My comment
yours.
was that the statements were simply, and if you left them in or leave them out, it isn't going to really change anything. But it paints a picture, and the picture is a self-serving statement that government's not the problem. Quote, the city's development process designed to accommodate, not to hinder development, and does not unduly restrain housing. The government's function is the only thing that hinders government, that hinders housing. The only thing that hinders it, other than the costs associated with doing it. So to put that statement in serves no purpose other than for the government, for perhaps staff or others that have drafted this language in the past to say, we're not the problem. When it
Well, I
goes on
think
to say.
the word
city-
unduly though,
when it-
right? Like, so unduly, you're,
Or at all. I mean,
Well-
again, unduly is again fudge language. The other sentence, the city's processing and permit procedures are consistent with state planning and zoning law and are not considered to be unreasonable constraints of the cost of housing. They are a major factor in the cost of housing. So to say unreasonable, my comment is, you're looking for comments on the flavor of our housing element. Those were my observations. I
Well-
think they were both self-serving sentences and this document would be unhindered by their removal.
I would make a comment that I think this document would be greatly hindered by adding that language, and we're actually working against ourselves in our housing amendment. We're going to make statements like that. I'm not sure you totally understand the reason why we're trying to get the housing element passed.
I understand completely, Madam
Okay,
Mayor.
well, I think you're working against the city on this part.
I disagree completely.
That's my comment. I wouldn't change, I wouldn't add those comments in. I don't think they're unnecessary.
I think I have two questions, one of Jessica and one of the city attorney. And I'm saying this mostly for the public's benefit. What are the sanctions if we don't get a housing element approved or get it in late?
If we get it in late, I'll cheat and answer your second part of the question. Then we would remain on the 4-year cycle. So we'd come back in 4 years instead of 8 with another draft housing element. The first part of your question, we run the risk of fines and litigation from the states, potentially significant fines. So from just a fiscal responsibility perspective, it would be good to move forward and meet our October deadline. That's not the only reason to adopt the housing element, but the fiscal reason is certainly an incentive to do so.
Got it. And city attorney, real quick question. I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this. But if we were a charter city, could we mitigate any of this?
No, charter cities do not have discretion in this area to alter the legislative mandates that you've been talking about.
And that's recent law, is it not?
Yeah. But Mayor Pro Tem James, can I also answer your prior question? I first off think your approach to find out which of these ideas is a fixed point on this legislative platform, I'm all for that. And I think we understand exactly what you want back. Disregarding a fixed point, though, we don't have to speculate about the cost of that because San Clemente in its 2015 update blew past one or wanted to oppose one and spent $750,000 litigating that. And so we want to understand. I know you get this, but we want to understand what we can and can't change in terms of the premises of this mandate. That ultimately ended
That was
in,
exactly the purpose of my question, was to bring that fact out.
and we couldn't issue building permits for a summer at all. So we really don't want to go to that place again. And I know I haven't heard anything tonight that suggests we are. But exploring how much we can influence and how much we can't, I think is my strong recommendation.
And I think that's kind of overall where we ended up. So I just want to be clear. We've given you some things to think about, but you're going to be bringing back to another meeting the inclusionary housing fee. And at that point, would there be a resolution part in that to make sure our zoning matches that 4% or, so that we have continuity? Because I think and I think it would be in there because we're going right back to where we were before.
It would, yes.
So is there anything else that you need from us on this?
I have just a couple minor points.
Good.
as we
I was
wrap
just
it
trying
up.
to follow up, make sure we
Um,
got everything. Go ahead,
Okay.
Councilmember. Duncan.
And I'm not sure how to put this regarding the 10 acres emergency shelter coalition. City Attorney, are we in litigation still with Emergency Shelter Coalition?
Yeah, we are. Well, the city has manifested its intent to acquire that property, and that's been opposed on various grounds, yes.
Does anything that we would do as regards to including that parcel in the as a potential site, would that in any way affect our litigation position, or not one way or the other? I mean, I don't want to mention it now, but is that something to be concerned about?
No, that wouldn't create concern about greater litigation. It might mitigate that case, but it doesn't resolve it.
Jennifer, Mayor Ward had talked about the reason that it was not included was because it was open space. Is that, or was there other reasons as well?
Yeah, that was the reason. There were several parcels that staff and residents and the planning commission had considered as potential rezoning sites. And it was at the direction first from the planning commission not to include open space parcels because of the hump, if you will, to get over the requirement for voter approval to
Right,
change the
the measure
zoning.
B. Okay, and then, but aren't there other open spaces that are on that list, or none of those are in open space?
No, none of the parcels that are shown as potential rezone sites are
zoned.
open space.
Okay. We touched on the in lieu. I will reiterate, and again at the next meeting, that I think our in lieu fee should be going the other way up. Again, for the same reasons that I think we should realistically be trying to listen to our consultants on this and get over the hump. It doesn't mean we have to fundamentally change things, but we want to prove that we are a good faith actor in this to the folks who are vetting us, and there are real sanctions if we don't get that approval. The last thing is on those zoned parcels where we look at rezoning, again, not building, rezoning to allow for residential. If I'm reading the report correctly, if we rezoned all of those parcels, we would have a surplus beyond the units that were required under the RENA. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay, if we did all of them.
Correct.
And we're still reviewing that. So when will we decide which ones, or when do we need to decide which ones do get rezoned perhaps and which ones don't?
We have to complete that analysis and the rezoning, in fact, within 3 years of adoption of the housing element. So October 2024.
Okay, so we have some time. I did notice in the survey, overwhelmingly every parcel was no rezone. So that's going to be interesting to tackle, because I do think there are some of those areas that are possibilities. Okay. In the meantime, will the public have the opportunity to weigh in again on those parcels as we go through that process and whittling down to which ones we actually may rezone?
Yes.
Okay. And just to reiterate again, it's just rezoning. If it doesn't mean they'll ever be developed into residential parcels.
That's correct. But for complete transparency, when we do go through the rezoning process, there is a component of it that makes it easier to develop housing. So there's the potential that although the city's not looking at an existing housing development proposal, that it might increase the likelihood of a
Okay.
housing proposal.
Sure. All right. Thanks, Jennifer.
I
Appreciate
have
it.
one question for the city manager. So we have permanent supportive housing on Las Bolas. I think it's 18 units, 16 units, whatever that case may be. We were promised that those units would create no issue for us from a disturbance or crime perspective. How's that working out?
Mayor Pro Tem, Mayor, members of the City Council. So I was made aware that there has been some recent incidences at that location. And so I would ask or allow me the opportunity to pull the calls for service at that location with Captain Tony Benfield for us to review those issues. And I can bring that back under our homeless update. And obviously, if I find any issues, I will also be reaching out to Friendship Shelter in conjunction with CD to make sure that they're aware of those issues and can correct those issues as quickly as possible.
Because if we look at 18, if 18 are problematic, how problematic will 984 be?
Well, just to point out, Mayor Pro Tem James, that there's also problems out on the streets spread all over the city. So it's not like that, this is creating new issues. These are the same folks, but at least they have one place to be and be sheltered. But I do take your point. We've got to seriously look at what's going on there. I mean, we aside from just the service calls aspect, it makes it look bad, and it inhibits future potential supportive housing.
And it's not a particularly time for this conversation, but it shows how flawed the state's philosophy is, the state law is, that we're giving housing to people without addressing mental health and drug issues, and alcohol issues, or whatever other chemical issues they may have. And so this is, we can rezone all these areas and we're still going to have mental health issues. We're still going to have drug issues. I have a question for Jennifer, going back to the conditional use permit for 5 units. Where's the conditional? So right now, if you want to build 2 units, you need a conditional use permit. Is that correct?
No, you would not.
Okay.
The conditional use permit is required when you want to build 5 or more
Okay.
residential units in one development.
So what is this getting us then? More than 5?
Right. One of the things that we'd like to include in the housing element is an amendment to the zoning code where you don't have to require a conditional use permit. And you might ask what that does. That means there's less discretion that the city has for that request. That means less time for the applicant to go through the process. They don't have to pay for a conditional use permit, go to the planning commission meeting and go through that entire process.
This is where I'm not following. So if I want to build 10, I don't need a conditional use permit?
Oh, I'm sorry. If you do build 10, you do need
Okay.
a conditional use permit.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
So again, is there anything else that you require from us tonight that you would like to see us discuss?
No, that is all for this evening. Very much appreciate your time and your comments. And of course, if you have any additional comments, we welcome them, and that includes the public as well. Thank you.
All right. I'm not seeing any more comments from council. So
Before you do that, I would just like to point out that Caroline and Carissa Moore, also from the U.S. Surfing team, have made it through to the medal rounds.
yay. That is wonderful. Thank you for that update. No, there's,
Motion to adjourn?
No, we have oral communications.
hold on one
It's not on-
second. I don't see
it's not
that.
on the agenda.
Yep, item number 2.
Oh, I thought we already did that. Okay.
So we have oral communications, but that is based on something that is not on the agenda. We already took all the comments for what was agendized tonight.
That's what I thought.
So these oral communications are something that is, they are not going to talk about the housing element.
Correct.
Okay,
Okay, first speaker is Tom Barnes, followed by Bonnie Barnes, followed by Kathy Esfahani.
This,
We need, do we have our slides?
this won't be as exciting as the previous discussion. Okay.
There we go.
Honorable Mayor and Council, I'm Tom Barnes, a resident of San Clemente for 35 years. Amazon trucks will make traffic worse and threaten the health and safety of our residents. Slide 1. In Rancho San Clemente, 4-ton trucks are prohibited on Del Cerro and Vista, Montana. Commercial trucks like these are supposed to use Pico for access to the business park. Slide 2. This map shows where the signs are posted and what they say. Captain Manhart says that a traffic ticket would be $231. The signs are mostly ignored. Slide 3. 4-ton trucks on Del Cerro have been a problem for decades. In fact, the Orange County Sheriff's Department issued 70 citations in 1996. That's 70 citations. Since 1996, there has been a sharp decline in enforcement. The number of 4-ton trucks on Del Cerro has increased dramatically. From 2015 to 2021, only 8 citations were issued to individuals having commercial driver's licenses. Next slide. Trucks from the Amazon warehouse will only exacerbate the problem. This issue of using Del Cerro as a thoroughfare, that street was not designed to be a thoroughfare. And we went through this battle back 2006 when we fought to keep the golf course from putting 156 or 175 condos on it. And we won that. So what I'm getting at is that we need to stay vigilant, treat this issue just like we treated Measure A. They tried to take away our beach in North Beach, and that we have to deal with and have had to deal with in Measure C. So what we need to do is to keep in mind that people say, well, that's never going to happen. Well, we've seen it almost happen before, and only because of some spirited citizens did it stop it from happening. And so we have to keep that in mind. Thank you.
All right. And slide 5, please. Next slide, please. There we go. All right. Honorable Mayor and City Council, I'm Bonnie Barnes, RSCCA Board President. Is Amazon really managing their own traffic study? Information.com and business.com report this. In Milton, New England, morning convoys of 50 to 100 vans leave the warehouse every half hour, jamming up traffic in intersections. At night, 52 semi-trailers pour into the warehouse between 10 and 11 p.m., making noise measured at 85 decibels. Trucks speed to make fast deliveries, ignoring traffic signs, damaging traffic lights, trees, and other structures. Amazon then denies responsibility, saying that the drivers are managed by independent contractors, not Amazon. Slide 6, please. Next slide, please. An Amazon warehouse is not suited for San Clemente. The project will cripple traffic and increase accidents, operate diesel big rigs 24/7, cause air, noise, and light pollution, damage the roads, threaten health and safety, increase the fire risks, raise the urban heat index, depress property values, and harm our quality of life. They'll also rekindle arguments for a toll road through San Clemente. Slide 7, please. So close to 5,000 residents have already signed the petition opposing an Amazon warehouse in San Clemente. To sign the petition, go to change.org, click on the search icon, and type in "Stop the Amazon Warehouse in San Clemente." Join us. Thank you.
Hello, Kathy Esfahani. I'm a resident of North Beach. I live on Calle Las Bolas, which is a very charming, wonderful old neighborhood, which is not very safe for pedestrians. Our side of the street only has about half of it has sidewalks. There's nothing we can do about that, but we need a crosswalk as you head to the beach. You know the name of the street, Sacramento? Well, anyway, I think it's called Sacramento, but beautiful, big new houses just got built, condos, beautiful ocean views. They're $2.5 million each. So if you know where that is, that's where we need a crosswalk, because to walk from Las Bolas to the ocean, you have to get to that side of the street. And you can try to go around the traffic circle, but there's no crosswalk there either. And cars come fast. And to cross where those big, beautiful new houses are, there's very limited visibility as cars come around. So when we cross the street, either way, it's scary. You have to pause and look, and you never feel safe. So I know there's a traffic study going on now. There are some kind of cords stretched across the streets near us. I don't know the purpose of it. I hope it's for monitoring the need for a crosswalk, but as a resident, I gotta say, we'd appreciate you studying the need of a crosswalk. Thank you.
And Kathy, would you please contact me on that? You don't need to come back to the mic, just contact me and I will talk to, find out what that traffic study is. Thank you.
I have 2 cards from Donna Vidrine, but she can only speak once for 3 minutes, followed by Bill Krutinger.
I wanted to make sure I wasn't violating any rules with speaking to agendized items. So I'm going to speak briefly on permanent supportive housing. Councilman James, I hope you know that there's more than 18 permanent supportive housing units in San Clemente. And I don't think it's, I think, anyway, there's more than 18 units, and issues like mental health and drug addiction and alcohol addiction are being addressed professionally at these units. So I am not in favor of bullying tactics and pointing out specific permanent supportive housing in this fashion. So I just wanted to reiterate, there's a lot of, there are some units of permanent supportive housing in San Clemente, and these are being addressed and professionally managed. And about open space, isn't that property that we're considering selling to a gas station and charging and a convenience store, isn't that currently open space? Okay. But the property that we're requesting for open space to be rezoned, I consider that a more important use. And I think many residents in San Clemente consider that a higher and more important use to take care of our unsheltered, our unhoused, and provide more permanent supportive housing. So I think, you know, that's something to be considered. And an alternative to that would be Old City Hall, to consider that for a navigational center and permanent supportive housing. And I think right now that's zoned excess public property. So maybe that would be an alternative site if the 10 acres on Pico, if that isn't going to be considered to be rezoned to include in the SP2 zone. So possibly the Old City Hall site could be looked at to be included in the SP2 zone. And then we could get pretty much immediate navigational center and permanent supportive housing there. Thank you.
Is there any other comments?
Bill
Oh,
Krutinger.
thank you. I didn't see you behind the placard.
That's all right. Thank you, Mayor Ward. Now, a couple things that were definitely not on the agenda are a like a drug addiction element update or a mental health element update. As we were talking about the housing element, I'm not sure that those were really necessary to bring up earlier. I did send the city council, all of you, an email about a just very plainly racist deed restriction that was in place in San Clemente, not unique to San Clemente. They were very common at the time. But in the year 2020, the state legislature, took some affirmative actions to clean that stuff up. And that's probably how these things wound up in the housing element template that's being used. And well, they may not add any real meat to that agreement. I think that removing it would speak very, very loudly. So I just wanted to let you guys know about that. Also, with the change to the in lieu fee coming up, I hope that you guys will look very seriously at making that commensurate with the the affordable housing requirement, ideally raising both those things, but at least making them commensurate. And I think that passing what staff brings you will probably help. I think if you got it like was done last time, you will be really putting the city at serious risk of not being approved by HCD. Thank you.
That's all.
Madam
Okay.
Mayor,
Um,
I just want to say that Vonnie and Tom Barnes' comments on the heavy vehicles coming up Del Cerro is real. They're on there all the time. Maybe we could encourage our police chief to have his people maybe enforce that a little bit more vigorously. One ticket in the last 4 years is, they're multiple every day. So it's an issue.
I have a question. I found that fascinating as well. Let's say, for example, someone's having household goods delivered. That moving van cannot go down Del Cerro. Would they have to have another vehicle? Would they have to offload somewhere else and then take it to someone's house?
Or something like that. So I mean, basically the restriction is a tonnage per vehicle. So obviously there's a little bit of a variable of what the tonnage is, but they would have to find an alternate route if they exceeded that tonnage by definition. And I will, to your comment, Councilmember Knobloch, I will talk to Captain Binfield. I know we were working with Bonnie, and I saw Bonnie earlier last week, and I thanked her for helping out on the mystery of the sign issues, which were clarified in conjunction with Bonnie and staff, but we'll also now look at the enforcement aspect as well.
But there would be some residential areas in which there would not be a alternate route.
That could be very well the case, yes.
And so maybe possibly on something like that, we need to have some permit or some,
And
no
then
cost, but something where we allow a moving van to come for that particular time.
And I don't know, but we can definitely dig in, and I can report back at my city manager comments at the next meeting. There might be some exceptions to that from a residential standpoint versus a commercial standpoint. So we can definitely verify that and come back under updates.
But I agree with Mr. Knobloch, the one ticket in the past, however many years, that's just unacceptable. Because I don't even live there and I've seen 4-ton trucks there.
Understood.
Yeah. And I believe Vista, Montana, don't we have something but in certain hours where we don't allow those trucks on Vista, Montana also? No, I'm sorry, Vista Hermosa.
I
I'm so sorry.
believe so, but I can't speak to that
So
definitively.
that's also a requirement on Vista Hermosa. So with that traffic was supposed to be on Pico, for the business park. And so I know we tried to work that out, when we approved Rancho San Clemente, the resident
Correct.
portion. So I think that's good. I think it's good to have some enforcement on that.
Agree.
Okay. So I didn't see anything that we had to answer in the comments. So we do have a motion to adjourn by the Mayor Pro Tem. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Knobloch.
And just for the record, you're adjourning to tomorrow.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
let me
at
do that.
6. Okay.
Motion to adjourn to the adjourned regular meeting be held on July 27th, 2021 at 6 p.m. for the purpose of interviewing and appointing persons to serve on the city's Human Affairs Committee, Investment Advisory Committee, and Public Safety Committee. This meeting will be held at the Community Center Auditorium located at 100 North Cali Seville, San Clemente.
We required to read the rest because we read that the last meeting. Okay, so we have a motion and a second by Councilmember Noblock.
Councilmember Duncan,
Aye.
Councilmember Noblock,
Aye.
Councilmember James,
Aye.
and Mayor Ward.
Aye.
Carries 4-0.
Excellent.